Today's guest is an international best-selling author, the founder of Hill House Publishing, and over the past 30 years has impacted thousands of lives. Today she's going to share with you new insights, ideas and information to feel more empowered. Would you please help me welcome our good friend Krystal Hille. Krystal, thanks for joining us.
Thank
I better
you so
press
much
that button
for having
correctly. There we go.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for having me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Wonderful to be here. Now, the topic of leadership is hot, especially in times of a pandemic, and a lot of Australians have been looking for great leadership, especially within their careers and also in their communities. Leadership also has an element of vulnerability, and you talk about leaders having to be vulnerable. So how would you describe vulnerability for leaders?
You know, for me, I feel like the days in which we're either a professional or a mother or a father, or, you know, we no longer segregate these roles in that way. When people do business with us, they want to get to know the whole of who we are. And so in order for them to do that and to build that know, like, and trust factor, they need to know what they've got in common with us. So if we come across in social media or in our businesses as Miss Perfect or Mr. Perfect, nobody can relate to us because they know that in their lives, they're not that perfect. So it's like, oh my God, that's all right for her or him, but I could never be like that. So I can't relate. So I'm not going to buy from them. I'm going to buy from somebody who has something in common with me. And so when I do my social media, or what I recommend, and, you know, I do publishing, I share stories of leaders. What I say is the deeper you go into sharing those moments of growth, let's call them that, the more relatable you become, and the more you emotionally engage any potential clients in your story and therefore in your business.
I remember many years ago, I was here in Taiwan and I'd do some blogs and I was sweaty from the gym. I had my white cotton on t-shirt, I had my baseball cap on, and I got a phone call from my coach. And she said, "What are you doing wearing that shirt? What are you doing wearing that baseball cap?" And I said, "Well, it's raw, it's real. I've come out of the gym and there was something that I really wanted to share with my audience." And they really resonated with that. But my coach said, "You got to get out of that and you got to get into a suit." So I put on the suit and then I got feedback and they said, "Daniel, you look $1 million, but people are afraid to talk to you." And so I went back to the t-shirt and I went back to the baseball cap because that's me 12 hours of the day. And then I had more interaction and more response once again. And I felt for myself, being raw and real, people saw a very different side of me. And I think that's so important. I also see that a lot of people are hiding behind social media today and they can't show who they are. So this vulnerability, how important is it for these leaders to demonstrate vulnerability and to be visible, especially in times of a digital age?
You know, there's two types of vulnerability. There's the vulnerability to say, oh my God, I've had this day with my children or something's gone wrong. But if not just blurring it out, but really tying it in with a message. So we want to show that we're human, but we also want to show that we're able to distill the wisdom or the lesson on the general theme of that to somebody. So what I always say to my writers is, like, if something happens, share the story, bring it down to what is the underlying theme or core message here. So that's then how any reader can relate to you or anyone watching you, because then it's like, that's the bridge. You know, we need to come to the main theme. But if we're just blurting it out, that's not going to do any good for anyone, I feel.
How much vulnerability is too much? Because I think people are still confused. If I'm looking at buying $1 million home, do I have to share that socially? Do I have to share it with my team? If my marriage is falling apart, do I have to share it on social media? Do I have to share it with my team? I've got hemorrhoids. Do I have to tell the team? Do I have to share it on social media? How much is too much?
I think there's definitely a point when there is too much, for sure. Like, at the same time, again, it depends. What is your brand message? What do you stand for? What is if I was a doctor and I had hemorrhoids, I might talk about it. But if I'm a real estate person, I would probably not talk about it unless I can potentially tie it into a message. If I divorce and I have a shit day, I wouldn't always talk about it because it's complicated. And sometimes what I find is also people projecting so much onto you, and you get unwanted advice. And so it's really, I think when we are sharing vulnerable, what is really important is that we're setting certain boundaries or frameworks of expectation of what we are inviting in terms of the dialogue that comes from that and what we're not. And I see that done very successfully by some of the leaders out there.
I remember many years ago, one of my mentors said to me, Daniel, you've got to demonstrate vulnerability. But it was as ambiguous as that. You've got to demonstrate vulnerability. And I said, well, what does it look like? Paint me a picture. What does this look like? What does it sound like? And so for me, it was so ambiguous that I couldn't understand what I should do or shouldn't do. And so I got a little bit more clarity, and somebody said, Daniel, you should talk more about the challenges of your upbringing, some of the learning disabilities that you had. Share that with people. So when people look at you, they go, oh, he's not perfect. He has fallen down. He has scratched his knee. But for me, internally, I felt conflicted because where I grew up, you don't whinge. There's no whinging. There's no moaning. There's no bitching. And for me, it was a bit of a conflict because I knew that if I shared that story, I'd then connect at a deeper level with others. But I still had to get through that mental and emotional block of you're whinging, you're whining, you're complaining. So how are you dealing with those challenges? Because people have got great stories, and I think people have phenomenal stories, but I think they feel so conflicted about sharing it. Do I have my dignity? Am I preserving the dignity of the perpetrators? There's a lot going inside of their mind.
Absolutely. And when people are coming into, my books, and I think there's always two drafts. Like the first draft is the blah, where we just share uncensored, losing our dignity, going fully into it, just getting it out of the system. So we're opening the floodgates, as you were saying, there's a bit of hesitation. Should I really do that? So if you've got the freedom to, the first draft is just out and nobody's going to see it but you and maybe your mentor or somebody who's coaching you or helping you with that, that's a very liberating thing to do. And then you can go back and say, okay, look, if I was to read this, can I bring the voice of the storyteller into this a little bit more? Can I kind of remove myself from this a little bit in order to create that bridge to the reader, where they might also, like if we're talking about learning disabilities, it's where they might have had learning disabilities. So you share a specific example of what were the challenges that you had, and then you relate it back to the bigger picture of learning disabilities in general, for example.
I saw one example of vulnerability many years ago, and I didn't think it was a great example for the individual. They were given advice by their coach that they should take to social media and talk about the STDs and the STIs that they had transmitted through unprotected sex. And they built up the courage. They shared the story, but the context was wrong. As you mentioned before, if you're a real estate agent, do you want to share your hemorrhoids, your story? If you're a doctor and you got hemorrhoids, would you like to share the story? Well, in one context, it could be good. And I saw this person's career collapse out of one social media post, and it was screenshotted and sent out and around 1,000 times to people before it could get taken down. And now, when they see that person, it's always referred to, oh, that's the dude with the STIs. That's the dude with the STDs. And his missus must have them now. And I think it could have been pulled off in the right context. But in the context that he was trying to do it, it definitely backfired. So how do you know? How do you choose this? Do you start with discovering your context? What do you do?
Sometimes it helps to just run it past a good friend who knows you, who knows your mission in this world, who knows your intention. Because the STI or STDs, they're perfect for somebody who might be a sex coach. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't share that kind of stuff. But what I would share is, with taboos, it's really tricky, isn't it? Unless you're an expert in the particular taboo that you're dealing with or that you're exposing, I wouldn't go there. I think that's where vulnerability goes too far, or it's like an oversharing.
And I was confused when I was told to be more vulnerable, because there was things that I thought, well, I should share some of these secrets. But then I thought to myself, well, if that gets back to my mother, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. So there was some things that I did share and things that I didn't share. So for leaders to be able to develop vulnerability, what's the first step that they can take? What would you suggest the first thing they do to start to develop this vulnerability?
I think it's about when you mess up in something, we all mess up, to really take responsibility for that, and seeing if you can take a lighthearted spin on it, and then to say, this is what happened. I don't have an example right now, but it's like the ownership, really taking ownership of what's going on, and then making a bit of a joke or adding a bit of a learning to it as well.
I remember years ago, I lost a business and I lost a career, and I came back to Australia, and the only job I could take was becoming a builder's labourer. And I was a builder's labourer, and then I was also a traffic controller. And I used to hold one of these signs, stop slow, and I'd direct traffic on the streets of Sydney. And I remember when I'd go to work, I would pull my shirt up over my face, I'd pull the cap down as far as I could go, and I'd hide myself. And for many years, I felt embarrassed and I felt shame about that. And I didn't know how to tell that story. But as I started to tell that story, I realized that there were so many other people, and it had become a metaphor for doing something that you didn't like. And everybody started to resonate. I've had a job that I've hated. I've done that type of thing for years. And I was having the same conversations with God. God, what's this life about? And I even met a gentleman the other day after telling my story. And he said, Daniel, I'm so glad you told that story, because I have been quitting my job for 15 years. He said, I felt like you. And he said, I've been quitting my job for 15 years. And I said, you quit it 15 years ago? He said, no, I've been trying to quit for 15 years. And what I realized is that our stories, although they might not be exactly the same, there's that metaphor and there's that connection between others. And it does really start to close that gap and build that rapport.
Exactly. I mean, stories can have the power to empower us when we share them, and they have the power to transform others. Like, they can heal us and they can transform others when they listen or read our stories. And just going back, I have an example of, on social media, I was sharing, I had breast pain, and I was sharing that, but not because I'm just saying, I have breast pain. But what happened is that I used the power of intention to really tune into what this was all about. And then I did the affirmations, I did the visualization, and the next morning I woke up and it was gone. So I shared that on social media, and the engagement I got from that post was incredible. Yes, there were some people saying, oh, you better get that checked out. You know, they were kind of going down the fear path of it. But my message was one of inspiration and hope that, yes, these things happen, but we have the power to change something. So
for a lot of leaders, and for people who want to be future leaders, there's a law in marketing called the law of visibility. And we have to be seen. We have to be social. People have to be able to understand who we are. But one of the challenges is that most people at the start of their journey, they are invisible. And I was reading a coach's blog the other day, and she was shouting out all of her challenges. I'm new. Nobody knows me. I've just started coaching. I've got no case studies. I don't like social media, or I've avoided my whole life. I have no friends on social media. I don't have a website. Nobody can find me. And so she was sharing her challenges as starting out as a coach and wanting to become a leader. And really, the problem was nobody could see her. She was invisible. So what's your zone of genius? How are you working with these types of people?
So what I do is, and I've had a lot of these people coming into my compilation books, and what I do is one of my clients the other day was saying to me that I'm a heart-driven master at unplugging somebody's potential. So with my coaching background, what happens is that I have a conversation with them, and the way I ask the questions and my vision of what I can see in them suddenly open something up in them that they hadn't even realized themselves. Like, just a simple reframing, especially with this coach that you just mentioned, I would have reframed so many things for that. And then these examples wouldn't be hindrances anymore. They would be they would become her superpower. So what I do is I bring these people into what I call a sacred container, or a really safe container, to help them unleash and unlock their story, to write that down in these best-selling books that I produce. And what happens in the process is that they don't just get clearer on their message. Like, even people who've been in business for a long time, they're clear on their message, but sometimes it's like a message that we know conceptually. What happens in the process of writing, and what happens in my containers, is that we drop them into the body and they embody their questions. And because of the themes of the book, they're all themed, suddenly it's like an inquiry that they live with, and therefore it becomes embodied. And so that is the beauty. Higher clarity on the messaging, trusting themselves. It's like, you're being given a title, and now suddenly you have to embody it. Yeah, you're now a best-selling author. Go and be that in the world. It's like, oh, me? Really? Okay. So now we have to do that inner work to really step into our expert status. And that's what I do with these books that I produce. And I'm just totally in love with that. I'm very passionate about.
I think having a book is so important, and not just for coaches, but I think for business people. And moving into relationship selling, which is so important today. People don't care about your prices, they care about your relationship. But in today's businesses, as we grow and scale businesses, we can't grow a business off one customer. We've got to have multiple customers. But with multiple customers comes a lot of time. And it takes a long time to tell your story to everybody that you meet. And that was one of my struggles when I was growing my business. And I thought about this back in 2014. And I said, how can I take my story and get it out there? How can I tell it once, but it can keep repeating itself forever? And I remember I was doing webinars, and I was putting a lot of advertising dollars in there, but nobody showed up to the webinar. But I recorded everything that I did, and I took my content and put it in a book. And the funniest thing happened was nobody showed up to the webinar, but one person bought the book, and then they hired me for about 7 years, and I had around about $120,000 worth of coaching income from one book. So the webinar didn't work for me, but the book did. And today I can still use that book. So I wrote that book maybe 2014, started distributing it in 2015, but I'm still giving it away today. So when I meet people, I give them a copy. And it's so much easier for them just to, from the comfort of their home, to understand who I am through the book. So if you're a business owner, I recommend that you get a book, because it tells your story over and over again. Now, for your book writing, you've written a lot of top-selling books. What's coming up for you? Is there any new bestsellers on their way?
Yes, so we've got one launching next Friday, which is called Inspired Living, a guide to ignite joy and prosperity. And we have Dr. Larry Farwell in it, who's one of the top 100 inventors of the century, which is very exciting. So people are interested, they can come and get that book. But I've also got one coming up that is open for enrollments right now, and that is called Inspired Entrepreneurs. And yeah, the Inspired Relationships one is on there right now, Embracing the Magic of Your Soul Mission. Actually, there is a typo which I'm just seeing. So it's Inspired Entrepreneurs, Embracing the Magic of Your Soul Mission. And then there's a second one, Inspired Connections, Unleashing the Magic of Deeper Relationships. So both of them are open for applications. And what I love about multi-author books is that you only have to write 8 pages. So it doesn't take a lot of time. There is a structure and a framework that I provide, and it also is in collaboration. So you meet new people that you can create collaborations with. And that's one of the things that has happened. People got together in my books, and they're now doing top-end, high-end retreats together. and they met in my book. So there's a lot of unexpected benefits that can come out of this.
I think that's one of the best parts about joining a mastermind as well. I was in a mastermind, and the content wasn't good, but the relationships that I formed there were phenomenal. And I probably stayed 6 months in the mastermind. I got what I needed and I moved on, and I kept the relationships forever. And I think it's because you start to meet like-minded people. They're on the same journey. They want the same things. They're resonating on the same frequency. And you all come together in these masterminds. It's very exciting.
Yeah. And you know what? There was just an example of vulnerability. Like, I just acknowledged, like, oh, there's a typo on my website. And I didn't make a big deal of it. I wasn't ashamed of it. I now need to go speak to my VA and fix it. But it's that acknowledgement that, you know, it's not a big deal. And we're all humans. And so I think that was just a nice little example.
Well, I had a lot of learning disabilities, and that's the best thing about having learning disabilities. I don't see spelling mistakes. I used to get people write to me. I used to go to school with. They said, "Daniel, I love your content, but you make a lot of spelling mistakes." And I said, "That's why I like to do speaking, because I don't make spelling mistakes when I speak." So,
Yes.
Yes, leaders need to be vulnerable. Now, Krystal, for our followers who want to learn more about what you're doing and your upcoming books, where can they find you on the internet?
So I'm on all the social media platforms, but the easiest way to especially get involved in the books is to go to my website, krystalhille.com/publishing. But I'm especially on LinkedIn and Facebook is where I hang out as well.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll put the website in the show notes. That's krystalhille.com. Head over there now, check out all the great work that Krystal's doing, and make sure you get a book. I forget the statistic in America, but it was crazy in the amount of people that intend to write a book in their lifetime.
81%.
There it is, 81%. It's huge.
Yeah.
So if you feel that book's inside of you, get it done now, and you'd be pleasantly surprised on what it will do for you, especially as a leader. All of a sudden, you become visible. And if you just need a competitive advantage in the marketplace, it might just be having that book. You could be the person with the book and the leader next to you doesn't have one, and you're going to get all the attention. Krystal, thanks for joining us here today. Thank you for sharing your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, head over to krystalhille.com right now. And remember, one idea at the right time is enough to change your life. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Krystal, thank you so much for being here. Greatly appreciated.